Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today we're talking with Dr. Nate Schneider about pursuing a fulfilling career path and total financial freedom and the mindset it takes to get there.
That's where the freedom comes from, and that's where the fulfillment in life comes from, is when you can choose what to do with your time and it's paid for. And then all the information that I had read about and compiled and those dots I was trying to connect were exactly what you guys do.
Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks. I'm Erin Nevacosi, and I have one of my Terra Firma partners here, Megan Gregg, and we have a very special guest, Dr. Nate Schneider. He is a former chiropractor turned anesthesiologist based in the Midwest, and he's also a Wealth Mavericks podcast listener turned Terra Firma member. Nate, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you guys so much. So glad to be here, and it's going to be fun. We're going to have a good conversation and chat a little bit.
I love it. I have heard so many good things about you, Nate, but this is our first time actually meeting. Megan has her members that she takes great care of. I have mine, and she's been the one to have the pleasure of getting to know you over these past few months. So now it's my turn. It's our listeners' turn. I know I mentioned that big career pivot that you made years ago, so I can't wait to hear more about that. And then we're going to talk just about this journey that you're on toward building serious wealth and achieving financial freedom, because that is obviously what so many of our members and listeners are going after. So let's start at the beginning. Tell us what made you begin a career in chiropractic, but then move to anesthesiology.
Yeah, so I certainly took a non-traditional approach, a windy road, so to speak. And initially, I think chiropractic was a big part of my life because when I was a kid, growing up, I was really focused on sports, athletics, really fascinated by, biomechanics and the musculoskeletal system. And sports injuries kind of led me to physical therapy and chiropractic. So that's what initially kind of gave me a little charge toward that area, so to speak.
Okay. So how many years did you spend as a chiropractor?
So I spent 4 years in total. And at that point, I'd kind of given it a fair shake and decided that it wasn't the perfect fit for me. While at the same time, I was kind of driven and challenged to do something more. It just wasn't, it wasn't quite fulfilling me personally. And so, I was looking for that next thing. And obviously at that point in time, I was already established in, the healthcare world. So I kind of used it as a stepping stone.
And then what drew you to anesthesiology?
Mostly the instant gratification with patient care. And I had done some shadowing prior to making my decision on that. After I had decided I was going to advance on into medical school, I wanted to be sure that I knew, the exact specialty that I wanted to get involved in, because it was my second go round, so to speak. I was kind of taking a step back, so I needed to make sure that I was confident in that choice. But yeah, I think the instant gratification. So kind of examples of, that, or someone that, has shoulder surgery and is in pain, and I can do a nerve block and get, instant pain relief, or, a labor epidural for someone who's, having a baby.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank God for you. Let me say that.
Well, Erin, there's so many doctors that go through a similar transition as Nate, where they start off in one place and they realize it just doesn't fit who they are. They're not finding their joy in it, and finding joy in what you do. It's everything. So for you, Nate, I'm curious to know, what was that moment that you kind of knew it was time to pivot? Was there a moment in time where you found, gosh, I just really love this other field? What really drew you in that direction?
It was a gradual process. Initially, my first year or two when I was a chiropractor, I was pretty ramped up and excited about it. And then I started to think in the back of my mind, I wonder if I can, take this to the next step or the next level and kind of challenge myself a little bit more. Um, and some might say that chiropractic and anesthesiology aren't related, and they're really not. Really nothing to do with each other at all. But it was that next step as far as like an educational process, and a challenge, and while also staying within the medical field that kind of sparked me. And I thought, you know what? I thought I can do this.
Did you
Yeah.
worry that you might get into something new and then, oh, I don't like this either?
I did. And there was a big fear also that I might not succeed because it was a risk, especially at that time being, gosh, I was 29 or 30 years old. And, I already invested a lot of time and a lot of educational money, a lot of student loans into, one career. And it was kind of, it was to go on to that next step. It was a big risk, especially at that age. I already felt kind of behind, you know, years wise. But it was all or nothing. And I thought, you know what, the time's going to pass anyways. And
Right.
if I don't attempt this next challenge, to better myself and keep achieving, then those years are going to go by.
Right. And Aaron, we have quite a few members that are in Nate's shoes. Nate, I just talked to someone yesterday who's our member who became a doctor close to 50 years old. And he feels the same way as you do, feeling behind, that feeling of pressure that he has to catch up to his teammates, his colleagues. For you, what kind of advice would you give to that doctor that is feeling that pressure, that feels behind through just your experience?
Yeah, so I think everybody's kind of on their own path, right? So there's a couple of perspectives to look at it through. One of them is comparing yourself to others. And I think that's like one of our biggest, faults as human beings. I know it's one of mine for sure. Because I always like to look around, because I'm competitive. I always like to look around and be like, I'm behind him in whatever aspect in life. But there's also this personal growth and achievement that happens. And it doesn't, the timing and comparing to others, you know, that's something that's kind of isolated in itself. But everyone's path is a little bit different, and I can certainly speak to that with what I've explained to you guys. But it's more about personal growth and those achievements. Whenever that may happen in life, we don't have control of that all the time. You can make a list of X, Y, and Z that you want to achieve in your life, and go back and look at that. And mine's never really gone like that. You know, and that's great for people, when it does. But I got to say, it's probably pretty rare, really, in reality.
Absolutely. An answer doesn't get better than that. That's the Nate that I know. It's just like a peek into your personality for real, because you care so much about bettering yourself. And that is your main focus. How can I be a better version of me? Which is so important as you grow and transition through one field of medicine into another. Aaron, I know you have kind of some questions around mindset, but I don't want to jump the gun. I think that we're still a little bit in kind of the career transition chat. I know that starting over can be a bit treacherous for a lot of people. Did it feel more like building on what you already knew, or did you feel like you said, like it was completely different?
So I think a combination of the two. And I'll kind of talk about both of them. I definitely had a foundation for, I'd been through a lot of schooling already. And obviously, I felt like when I went to medical school, I had a jump start, because of chiropractic school. So but my knowledge base was certainly there and kind of gave me I feel like some advantage there. Um, but on the flip side, kind of like we talked about before, there's also in the back of your mind when you take on a challenge like that, a little bit of fear and animosity because it is a whole new world. Um, and so those things can, kind of have, both effects at once, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said about how the time is going to pass anyway. And so often people, whatever it is, people are like, well, it's too late for me. But it's never too late. And something we say often around here is like, well, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is
Yeah,
today. And like, you only get one life. So if you're not totally happy, it's like, what do I have control over that I can change today? So in your situation, it sounds like the leap of faith paid off.
absolutely.
So what do you love most about what you do now?
From a day-to-day standpoint, I do a whole lot of different things, and one of my days compared to the next is very different, and I like that variation. And that really that helps, number one, with trying to avoid burnout. And a lot of physicians, talk about this, and I know you guys have talked about this too. And it is a big challenge, being a physician, and that's one thing that really helps me. And I don't mean to jump ahead and change topics or
That's great.
anything like that.
No, because that was one of my next questions, because I know you're very personal growth oriented from what I've heard. You fit right in around here, which is awesome. But of course, we do talk about burnout a lot. So what do you do in your life to stay healthy, both physically and mentally?
Yeah, so this is definitely, for me, it's a mindset thing. And it's easy to get into a rut when you start to feel like you're getting burned out. And for me, I have to zoom out and I have to look at the big picture. And when things get tough, or the hours get long, or whatever the situation may be, we got to, keep things basic regarding like exercise, diet, just a healthy lifestyle in general outside of work.
Mhm.
So that, you have less of that effect or that heaviness.
Yeah. So what does that look like in your world? Like, what do you do for exercise and how do you make sure you eat healthy?
Yeah, so I like multiple things when it comes to exercise, mostly weight training, but also the outdoors. I love the mountains, outdoor activities like skiing, hiking, and those types of things. Also like to do some, sauna and things like that. That some of the more seem like simple things, but can make a difference with relaxation and overall health. And then diet wise, kind of just staying boring, really. Less processed foods, things like that. Just basics, really, which aren't always exactly fun, but usually it's more important in my life, anyways, to just do the basics well,
Yeah.
rather than trying to cut corners or get fancy or look for the next like silver bullet, so to speak, because there's just really no such thing.
Definitely. It's about health and longevity. And, there's been some really interesting studies. You're the doctor here. So, surrounding sauna and being in the sauna, I know all throughout Europe, it's a very common thing to sauna regularly. In the US, it's been a bit more nuanced over the past 20 years or so. Have you seen some of those studies and what are your thoughts on them?
I have, and don't quote me on these, but I've followed this relatively closely with some experts, and they have talked about a lot of studies about people in different parts of the world that have always had sauna implemented into their lifestyle, comparatively speaking to the U.S., which is not so much a thing in our culture, you know, and there are huge differences in morbidity and mortality in those regular sauna goers than non. And like I said, I can't get into the details on those studies because I don't have it right in front of me. But the sign, and it's been studied a lot. Science is really legitimate behind it.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Amazing.
if someone's listening and they're like, maybe they haven't heard of that, or they just don't do it, or where do I do it? We talk about it a lot internally at Terra Firma because like Joe and his
Yeah,
wife go to the gym sauna and it's like 180 degrees.
yeah,
I used to belong to a place where you would just sit and watch Netflix in the sauna. I'm like, I need more. So now I've joined a place where you work out in the sauna, but I just feel so cleansed and loose and just peaceful and calm. And we're always trying to find more ways around here. Like, how do we improve not just our lifespan, but our health span, while we're here? So totally
yeah.
recommend that as well. I would love to pivot to money. because of course that's what originally brought you to Terra Firma. And
It
we love
is.
your zest for, not handing over so much money to the government and putting more toward your wealth. So what originally sparked that for you, this quest for wealth?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to, and I've talked to Megan about this a lot. You're always looking for that next challenge and things that you might be interested in when you're learning throughout your life and whatever those interests may be. And after I got established as an anesthesiologist, I started thinking more about finances and taxes and investing. And so just originally started reading a lot of books and watching a lot of online videos. And it was really I was cherry picking a lot of information and trying to put those things together, right? And I was I would come across all these things that are really fascinating to me, but I'm like, and I was like, these are great ideas, like in theory, but I was like, how can I do this, like, and actually make this happen and make it real? And I would continue to try to educate myself, and I was like, I get it, but I was like, how do I do it? And so this is kind of like where from point A to point B I got, and I was like, okay, these ideas are great, but I haven't been able to change anything, because I don't know how to do it. And that comes down to things like how to do it legally. I don't want to get in any, and honestly and ethically, and how to navigate all that. It's a whole different world.
It is. And that's something we hear all the time is like, I know enough to know that I'm overpaying and there's so much more I could be doing the way the wealthy are. But like, how do I wrangle all these professionals? How do I put it all together? So that's something Bob says a lot is like, we help you connect all the dots. So I assume that's what made you find us, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
I came across you on social media at one point, just a random pop-up in my feed. And then I navigated to Bob's YouTube channel. And then that just made sense to me because, number one, it was for physicians. And so that kind of connected some dots for me. And then all the information that I had read about and compiled and those dots I was trying to connect were exactly what you guys do. And so that's when I reached out and I was like, this could be this could be what I'm looking for.
I'm so glad. So what motivates you in that quest for freedom? What does that look like for you?
I've talked to Megan about this a lot. That's a lot to unpack there.
We talk a lot. If you couldn't tell, as like a coach working with Nate, we're texting, we're emailing, we send each other videos, or we're jumping on a call together. And this is what the relationship with our team should be like for every member here, Nate, is just to feel welcomed and like they have somebody they can bounce great ideas off of. And you're doing that all the time. You're just asking me, what's the next book I can read? What's the best podcast that you've heard of that can help in this topic or that topic? So big moves for you. I didn't mean to interrupt. So jump back to your freedom point.
No, yeah, I think, the freedom of all this is all the time that's been invested. And Bob talks about this a lot, but, especially for me, it was a double whammy with chiropractic school and medical school. All the time that I feel like I've lost because, I compare myself to others. And how can I get some of that time back? And what the freedom means to me is being able to seek out these other options, whether it's tax savings or investments, things like that can not only make up time for me, but then, like Megan and I talk about a lot, trying to out earn what I can do with my hands in a given amount of hours in a given amount of days. It's a time thing.
You put that really well. So yes, we talk about that, like your assets outperforming you. And we're not saying you have to stop working, but what an amazing point to get to where now you can work on your terms when you want, because you want to, not because you have to. So what are some of the goals that get you excited in your future that you're aiming for?
I would definitely say, delving into the alternative assets, and building those up and planting those seeds with the whole goal of, what we just mentioned. And then I feel like that changes your entire perspective about work and about stress in your life, and also opens up opportunities to where you have more control of your time and you get to choose. Because ultimately, that's where the freedom comes from. And that's where the fulfillment in life comes from, is when you can choose what to do with your time and it's paid for.
It's the ultimate.
Preaching. I think that when it comes down to like goals and what we're striving towards, Nate, that freedom point is everything. The other goals that we discussed, like you're going to hit those. And guess what? We're going to add new goals to the list as you elevate and evolve. And having a team behind you, striving for these goals with you, how has that impacted your goal game in this process?
It's changed my thought process on it, because as I mentioned before, I had all these resources that I was cherry picking and understanding, but taking action is a different thing. And so I feel like what you guys have implemented for me is you have those action steps in order, and I just have to execute. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when I know what to execute, I can definitely execute, but it's knowing what that thing is to do,
Right.
That sounded really goofy.
No, I love that.
It did not. It sounded amazing. So first off, when you think of like people getting into medical school, going through and learning all of the stuff that you did in your career, they don't have a class on this. This is not something that they educate on. You were doing the best with your hard-earned education and knowledge that you could. And you sought out support from people who have 2 decades of experience in this space to help you make the best educated choices. I'm proud of you. That is a huge move. A lot of people never make it.
Well, I think there has to be a certain level of curiosity in this, and you do have to dig in a certain amount, and you have to kind of take it upon yourself, because nobody's going to come and do it for you. Um, but if you do dive in with enough of that curiosity and educate yourself and understand all these things that we've talked about, like taxes and alternative investments and whatever it may be, that's a whole, that's 10 books right there that are all in one. But yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. And after you understand all those things and how they work, then you just need to find someone who can help you with it.
I'm glad you found us, Nate. So I wanted to touch on the 510s because, again, Megan gets to meet with you all the time. We talk about the 510s lifestyle around here because, what good is building all this wealth, saving on taxes, like if you sacrifice your health or your relationships or anything. So spiritual, family, business, financial, and fitness. I wanted to ask you, what maybe have you struggled with the most in those things, or what do you see your fellow doctors maybe struggling most with when it comes to those 5 pillars?
Yeah. Life is busy for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I think from my standpoint, mine is always revolving and cyclical. And something's on the back burner, at least one or two of those things at any given time, because the other ones are on the front burners. And it's cyclical, like I said. And when I notice that one of those areas is lacking, then I try to make changes in that, but then there's always, something to follow that in a different category. And I think that's pretty normal. Like that ebb and flow is just really expected, and that's just part of life. But it's kind of just a mindset of, okay, I'm really, not doing so well in this aspect of my life, and I need to bump it up a little bit. And that comes at a cost, usually of something else. And that's just part of the deal. But, sometimes you just have to, spin those plates, so to speak.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's so true. And I think our big goal is showing that each thing impacts all the others. And if you let one fall so far, it's not even on the stove anymore. It's over in another room. It might be too late to even get it back on the back burner. So having that intentional focus on every area, so that you can thrive. But you're right. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much you can do. But the time to focus, I think, is really powerful.
Also, of course, and also I think it's just really interesting. We have, members that do take this into their own hands, Nate, just from visual experience with members in 510s. Specifically, I can think of one. He'll probably know I'm talking about him. I hope he won't mind. I'm not going to say his name. But for one of my other grand doctors that I get to work with, he made an entire career shift because family and fitness and spiritual health was not able to be attended to. It was dragging him down. He was working 2 full-time roles at a hospital. Imagine that, director-based roles. I'm sure a couple of our listeners today are honestly probably in the same boat. And he was able to switch to locums and made that shift, works 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. I believe that's the structure, makes the same amount of money. Who would have thought? Same space, same career, but shifted into a different role. And now he gets to spend time with his family, travel, do all the things that, you guys make great money. You should be enjoying life and making these memories and getting closer as possible to that 10 out of 10 lifestyle. Now, Nate, the visual of 10 out of 10 in each of these areas. I see it in you. I see it in you every time I meet with you. I know it's something that is kind of far into the future in your mind, just from our conversations. Now, when it comes to 10 out of 10, for you, that pristine, that perfection, is there anything that comes front of mind that you think other doctors might feel when hearing, oh, you should be living a 10 out of 10 in each of these areas?
I think it makes people more mindful, obviously, because we can get so tunnel visioned in what we're doing. And there's a lot of moving parts in life, and sometimes just that mindfulness can make a big difference because it kind of helps you compartmentalize. And that's something that I've struggled with in the past, actually, is compartmentalizing, whether it be, too much focus on one thing and then it takes away from another, like we talked about before. For me, I really struggled with compartmentalization. And as I've gotten a little bit better with that, it definitely has made a difference. But it's the mindfulness of the situation,
For sure.
Of course. And, there's no Uncle Giuseppe coming to bust your kneecaps to tell you, oh gosh, you didn't do your fitness this week.
Right.
But holding this space for account, having this conversation with me or for other people with their coach in our membership, how does that feel for you? How does that impact your world, being able to bring up some of these topics that, do you really talk about these often with your peers, your colleagues, your family, your friends?
No, and it kind of, to be honest, when I broke this all down, I kind of had to tell myself the truth on a few things, and that's kind of tough, but it also, it's, you can't avoid it, the truth. And that's kind of a good thing because it's going to hurt a little bit, probably if you're honest with yourself.
So I definitely see that with some new members. Some are like all in right away. They're like, this is an amazing part of membership. And then some others are like, I'm just hiring you guys to save me big on taxes. What are we doing here? And we talk about how it's, we want to help you thrive, but also it counts as your material participation in your business so that you can offset your active income. So it does serve a dual purpose. But even my most resistant members come around and they're like, oh, I really do see the value in this. But I can just think of some people listening like, that's not for me, which we're not for everyone. Like we are, I think, special and different. And people like you, like, I think you have a lot in common with a lot of our members. There is like a common theme. So I would ask you, what do you think makes you different than a lot of the people who, because all doctors struggle with their taxes. I've talked to so many people who grumble at like, oh my God, I had to write this big 6-figure plus check again, but then they don't move forward in membership out of fear or complacency so what do you think makes you different that, you are in this with us?
Yeah, I have several friends in that situation, actually. And so I can definitely speak to that. And I think a lot of it is if, and we talked about that curiosity before, if you do go out and, find some resources to learn from, you start to understand more of this, right? Whereas if you don't do that and you kind of just sit back, anybody or oftentimes when people approach you about these kind of situations or tax savings or something, they automatically think like, especially as a physician, they feel like they're targeted and they're like, oh, this is a scam or something, or is this illegal or something of that nature. But if, like for me, I kind of came in educated because I had done a lot of reading and watched Bob's channel and learned that like these are real things. And so I kind of had already primed my brain already and understood that this is really what the tax code is and how it works, for example. Whereas if you tell someone that hasn't delved into this at all, they're going to be like, that seems shady.
That's such a good point. So there needs to be a little bit of interest there in the first place where you kind of dip a toe and then you dip another toe and you're like, oh, there's something here. And you kind of keep following that path. Whereas if you have no interest in it and the pain is there, but it's not quite deep enough to make a change. It's like, we can't force that. And, we'll be here when you're ready. But I think that's such a good point.
That was that was kind of my situation.
Definitely. I think knowledge is power. Knowledge is power in any situation. So being able to have that knowledge, you can execute and make great decisions. And I want to give you a little bit more credit than what you just said, Nate, to be completely transparent with everyone watching today. It comes down to being willing to take action. And we put things in place to be able to make it as low risk as possible for people to get involved in our discovery, to check us out, to see what their tax plan could look like. But from that perspective, it does take somebody that's willing to say, I'm going to make a change. I'm not going to sit and be complacent. I'm going to make a move and make it happen. And I just want to give you props. You did that. You made that move. And I'm curious to know, obviously, this has made a big difference in your life. I mean, in many different ways. We were just talking last night about who you surround yourself with and making that selection of just great people in your world and how that can make a difference. I'm curious to know, in your time at Terra Firma, working with our team, how has that impacted your perspective in that direction?
Yeah, so I think this goes along with also trying to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and whatever that may be. I think that, I've also, as I've gotten to know you guys, definitely we're on the same wavelengths with a lot of aspects of our life, not just money, but things from a ethical standpoint, things from like a Christianity standpoint and those types of things. And you're just lining up really important key foundations in your life. And so that's definitely something that has, been important to me throughout this journey is, because it's easy to get into these situations and then start to have doubts, and you're like, is this really right for me? But then if you do have those foundational, similarities, it gives you more confidence in the process. Those are important things to me,
I love that.
Core values for sure.
Yeah, core values. I just came up with a whole bunch of words and could have just said core values.
No, you're amazing. I mean, thank you for sharing all that. And we're just so glad you found us and decided to work with us. And I'm so glad I got to meet you today. I would love to wrap this up with kind of a lightning round of a few questions to wrap us up. I feel like we could talk about all this all day, but okay. So you're super into personal growth, just like the rest of us. So if you had to name one book or podcast that has really stuck with you and changed the way you think, what would that be?
Book-wise, this is a toughie because there's so many good ones, but rapid fire, I'd probably say Robert Kiyosaki, Cash Flow Quadrant.
Yes.
Okay. A man after Bob's own heart, right there.
Yeah, that was a biggie.
What is your favorite way to decompress after a long shift at work?
Short answer, sauna in the gym.
Yeah.
Or a walk around the neighborhood if it's nice out.
Yeah. Okay. And then if you weren't in medicine, what do you think you'd be doing?
I'd like to be a business owner or in real estate or something of those things that I'm already trying to, improve myself on.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be your freedom point. You'll hit, and who knows what you'll do, right?
I mean, and I say that because that is one of the real things that I'm interested in, versus like being an astronaut or something like that.
And now you got the best of all worlds right here. That's great.
Definitely.
Okay. And then what's one piece of advice you'd give to a new doctor just starting out?
I'd say, figure out those next goals and challenges that you want to, pursue. And you got to figure out how you want to do them, and you got to go take action on them. And that can be anything in life, But, after you start practicing, like that's where you're at. You're in the trenches and you're there. And that's great. And having that passion for that specialty that you're in is great. But you also got to find other things.
Yeah. Not have work be your whole life or identity.
Yeah, that 5-10s, living it. Living it day to day. Awesome.
Megan, anything you want to ask or add?
Gosh, I could just talk to Nate all day.
Talk to Nate all the time.
I do. I'm blessed in that way. But I would just say, we talked a lot about health and habits. I thought health and habits, it's something that people really struggle with, is building those good habits. They say 21 days of practice will bring a habit into your reality as a more permanent habit. So when it comes to your world, I know like being a doctor, particularly a new doctor, since we're talking about young doctors, how do they protect these habits when life gets chaotic? Is there any way for them to interject when they just get out of med school? They're trying to figure everything out. I know you were there quite a few years ago, but thinking back, what would you say kind of kept you grounded in those moments?
I think probably the first and most important thing is your relationships. Because you're going to need somebody or potentially want somebody to kind of lean on. And I mean this from like a work standpoint in your practice and in your group. And there's going to be other physicians that are more experienced than you. And I think it's important to watch them and take some things from them and find that mentor, so to speak, because it's not always going to be easy. It comes at a cost. I think that's an important thing from a work standpoint.
Awesome. So basically what you're saying is if anybody lives in Oklahoma, they're in anesthesiology and they can get a job at your practice, you might just get Nate as your mentor if you're lucky. Yeah, Thank you, Nate, for sharing.
Yeah.
It's clear you just have a lot of value to bring, and you have blessed us by being in our world. Thank you for being on the podcast with us. I'm so glad I got to meet you and that our listeners got to meet you.
Yeah, well, thank you guys too. It's been fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah. One of our next member retreats, maybe some members will get to meet you. So,
yeah. I can't wait. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Share with your friends. If you're a member and you want to be on the podcast, let's talk. I want to do more of these. Thank you so much. Yeah. And until next time, go be a wealth maverick.